Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We recently went through a very electric political campaign season, and one of the hotbed topics was women's rights in light of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. But I ask you, when have you ever heard a politician at any level of government campaign on improving our protection and safeguarding of our most precious resource, our children? The United States has one of the worst records among all the industrialized nations in the world when it comes to protecting its children. Over 700,000 unique cases are reported every year. As a perspective, that is roughly the population of Orlando and Tampa combined. That's one child every minute of every day that is being victimized here in the U.S. And ladies and gentlemen, that isn't all. 5 to 6 children die each day due to abuse. And it is our youngest that suffer the most. 85% of these deaths are children under the age of 4. And 45% never see their first birthday. What's worse is that, by far, it is a parent that is responsible for the abuse. Either the father or the mother or both. If one, it is often with the knowledge of the other, who chooses to do nothing about it. Consider, ladies and gentlemen, the persons most responsible for nurturing and protecting these children are the ones doing the most harm. Einstein once said, read quote, "If the parents are the ones causing the harm, who will look after these children if not you?" Let me just say from the outset that we feel the term abuse is way too kind of a word to describe the torture that these children endure. 75% are reports based on neglect and/or emotional abuse. 17% are physical abuse reports, and 8% are sexual abuse cases. Children in the first year of their life are 15% of all victims, and more than a quarter, 28% of victims, are no more than 2 years old. These are children that can't fend for themselves, can't speak for themselves. We hope that after this presentation, you will be their advocate from this day forward. Let me share some information on the different types of abuse and try and help you gain an understanding of just how serious this problem is. Later, I'll share the simple steps you can take to make a real difference in the lives of our children. The first is neglect. Red definition. Imagine bringing a life into this world that you set aside and ignore. Simply holding back love and affection to a newborn is enough to permanently impact their development. There are certain neural pathways that must connect before a certain age, and love is one cementing bond that makes many of those connections. Failure to give love and caring to your child can destroy their ability to consider how their actions affect others. To help children dealing with neglect, we need to be aware of what to look for. Here are a few signs that can indicate a child in need. Physical abuse is next. It is defined at red slide. But as I said from the beginning, using the term abuse is too kind. This is aggravated assault if it were an adult on another adult. It is attempted murder. In some instances, it is murder. The signs of physical abuse are easy to spot, read list. The signs of emotional abuse, though, are not. Yet the consequences in the overall development and quality of life for the child are just as severe. Go over the signs with audience. Next topic is sexual abuse. This is the least common of abuse forms, but it is just as heinous as the others. More so, in our opinion, this is evil incarnate. And this does not require the abuser to be hands-on with the victim. Exposing the child to sexual acts, photographing them in sexually suggestive poses, forcing them to watch or participate in sexual activity with another child is only the tip of the iceberg. Here are some stats you're not going to like. 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys is a victim of child sexual abuse. Children between the ages of 7 and 13 are the most vulnerable to sexual abuse. 20% of adult women and 5% of adult men recall being the victim of childhood sexual abuse or assault. Does this make you mad? It should. The problem with this and all forms of abuse is that we don't think about it or take action unless it is happening to us or our family directly. That is too late. Be aware of the signs of sexual abuse. This can be the hardest to spot because there is so little outward evidence, and the child has been coerced to maintain their silence. While children may not be direct victims of domestic violence, it is just as emotionally destructive as direct emotional or physical abuse. Children exposed to violence in the home often experience symptoms similar to combat vets dealing with PTSD, and the scars last a lifetime. We should also consider child trafficking. Human trafficking is the second largest, most lucrative criminal enterprise in the world. In the U.S., child trafficking is aggravated by four main factors: the porous southern border, predatory social media use, pornography, and broken families. A runaway child will be approached by a trafficker within 48 hours of being on the streets. Every 2 minutes, a child is trafficked to be sexually exploited in the United States. The average age of the child is 12, 15 years old, and consists of both boys and girls. Florida is ranked number 3 in the nation for human trafficking. Review slide bullet points. Notes below are for speaker information, used to highlight trauma outcomes of abuse victims. Childhood trauma is strongly linked to mental and physical health problems over the lifespan. It negatively impacts brain development, cognitive development, learning, social-emotional development, the ability to develop secure attachments to others, and physical health. It is also associated with a shortened lifespan. 20. See Figure 2 for additional information on the impact of childhood trauma. A considerable body of research demonstrates that children suffer the most severe, long-lasting, and harmful effects when trauma exposure begins early in life, takes multiple forms, is severe and pervasive, and involves harm by a parent or other primary caregiver, often referred to as complex trauma. Childhood trauma is more likely to lead to post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, than trauma that occurs in adulthood. Children exposed to several different forms of trauma are more likely to exhibit PTSD, e.g., anxiety, depression, anger, aggression, dissociation, than children with chronic exposure to a single type of trauma. Children and youth with PTSD may re-experience the traumatic event through intrusive memories, nightmares, and flashbacks. Avoid situations or people that remind them of the trauma, and feel intense anxiety that disrupts their everyday lives. In addition, they may engage in aggressive, self-destructive, or reckless behavior, have trouble sleeping, or remain in a state of hypervigilance, an exaggerated state of awareness and reactivity to their environments. However, there is no typical reaction to trauma. The vast majority of children show distress immediately following a traumatic event, but most return to their prior level of functioning. Generally, children's reactions to trauma differ based on the nature of the trauma, the child's individual, family, and neighborhood characteristics, and the overall balance of risk and protective factors in their lives. It also depends on their age and developmental stage. Young children who experience trauma may have difficulties forming an attachment to caregivers, experience excessive fear of strangers or separation anxiety, have trouble eating and sleeping, be especially fussy, show regression after reaching a developmental milestone, e.g., sleeping through the night, toilet training. School-aged children who experience trauma may engage in aggressive behavior, become withdrawn, fixate on their own safety or the safety of others, reenact the traumatic event through play, have frequent nightmares, exhibit difficulty concentrating in school. Adolescents who experience trauma may become anxious or depressed, engage in risk-taking or self-destructive behaviors, e.g., drug and alcohol misuse, dangerous driving, sexual promiscuity, unprotected sex, self-harm, illegal activity, feel intense guilt, anger, or shame. Adopt a negative view of people and society. In some cases, have persistent thoughts about suicide or seeking revenge. Review slide key points. Read slide children can't stop their abuse, but we can. But in order to do that, you have to be informed and you have to be vigilant. Review slide. And again, we want to stress that it isn't the stranger lurking in the shadows. Certainly, we have to teach our kids to be wary of strangers, but we also need to teach them boundaries on what is acceptable and what is not by any adult in their lives. Grooming is a process by which offenders gradually draw victims into a sexual relationship and maintain that relationship in secrecy. At the same time, offenders may also fill roles within the victim's family that makes them trusted and valued family friends. One of the scariest things about grooming is that it is highly successful, allowing offenders to slowly overcome natural boundaries long before the abuse occurs. The key is to recognize these red flag behaviors and minimize their opportunity. Predators aren't lurking by the schoolyard in drabby overcoats. They are neighbors, coaches, teachers, police officers, youth pastors, choir leaders. They come from all walks of life and serve in all kinds of jobs. They are typically well known to the child and the family, and they are adept at manipulating them both. This is one of the biggest mistakes we see parents make today. Every child has a cell phone that is connecting them to these predators, and you, as the parent, need to be vigilant as to how their phones are being used and to whom they are communicating with. Treat these phones as your own, because they are. You pay for them, don't you? Then you are not infringing on any privacy when you want to see what is on their phones. There are a number of apps, for example, that allow instant messaging that deletes after a certain period of time. Sexting is one of the dangers of online activity. Explain what sexting is. Once in the hands of the predator, they are subject to extortion. Some victims have committed suicide rather than face the expected humiliation of telling their parents of their mistake and getting help. And first and foremost is the ability to come to you with anything and expect to be heard. In 90% of the cases where a child finally got the courage to tell, the child was telling the truth. But only 1 in 3 adults believed them. Review slide. An Orlando waitress saved a young boy from allegedly abusive parents after she noticed he was bruised and wasn't being allowed to eat. On New Year's Day, Flavane Carvalho was working as a waitress at Mrs. Potato Restaurant on South Kirkman Road when she called police about a possible child abuse case, according to the Orlando Police Department. She told police that a customer, Timothy Wilson II, 34, did not allow an 11-year-old boy at his table to order anything, and that the child had bruises on his face and arms. She wrote a note that said, "Do you need help?" and stood behind the boy's parents where they couldn't see. The boy eventually signaled yes, and Carvalho called police. Wilson was arrested on 1 count of third-degree child abuse. When detectives interviewed the boy, he revealed other mistreatment, police said. Police said the boy told them ratchet straps were tied around his ankles and neck, and he was hung upside down from a door. He said he was hit with a wooden broom and handcuffed and tied to a large moving dolly. He also told investigators that he didn't get to eat on a regular basis as punishment, police said. Police took the boy to a hospital where doctors found bruises on his face, earlobes, and arms. He also was 20 pounds underweight. Wilson was arrested a second time on Jan. 6 and charged with multiple counts of aggravated child abuse and child neglect. Police said they also interviewed the child's mother, Kristen Swan, who admitted to knowing about the abuse and failing to seek medical care for the boy. She was arrested on Jan. 6 and charged with 2 counts of child neglect. The restaurant owner said it was divine intervention, and Carvalho was the right person, in the right place, at the right time. Carvalho had initially not been scheduled to work that day, but when another employee called out, she covered the shift. On top of that, the family was seated at the only table in the restaurant where Carvalho could have made the sign for the boy to see without his parents seeing what was happening. Orlando Police Chief Orlando Roland said he believes Carvalho's actions saved the boy's life. "We probably would have been talking about a potential homicide investigation if she had not intervened when she did," Roland said. The stepfather has been sentenced to life in prison after being found guilty of child abuse. After all, if those that are supposed to love and protect them are the ones causing the harm, who does that child have to count on? I thank you for your attention and consideration, and I hope you'll do more than talk about this over coffee with your spouse and coworkers. I hope you'll join us in taking a proactive step in protecting our children. And please feel free to follow us on social media, visit our website, or reach out to us directly with any questions or needs you may have. Good night.